Hail King Trump! Hail King Trump! Hail King Trump!
Not my king. I mean, how is it even possible that this bipedal orangutan is still president?
Trump's presidency is like his hair. It's an abomination, shouldn't be there, defies logic, has taken on a life of its own, and is somehow accepted as legitimate. Still. So it got me wondering, how easy would it be for wannabe Mussolini to be a dictator? That's what I call Trump. Like, it's not impossible for an elected leader to become an autocrat. Take the real Mussolini, for example. So I decided to do some research. And let me tell you, research was not easy. I ran into some distractions, namely cute little piggies eating ice cream. Oh boy, is he cute. They even have pigs in rain boots? Wow.
Hey honey, how's your research on the rise of Mussolini going?
Lucky for me, I have somebody to keep me on track. And so I started doing my actual research on the rise of Mussolini. And let me tell you something, it is not for the faint of heart. So I went to bbc.com because it's the best source for history. And here is how Mussolini rose to power. Step 1. It was 1919. Mussolini formed the Fascist Party from unemployed war veterans. Then he created an armed squad known as the Black Shirts who terrorized political opponents. Sound familiar? Step 2. In 1922, the Fascist Party was invited to join the coalition government. Sound familiar? This is sort of what's happening now, where there are literal Nazis running in the Republican Party. So the Republican Party is kind of inviting Nazis to run for office. Step 3. By October 1922, Italy seemed to be slipping into political chaos. The Black Shirts marched on Rome, and Mussolini presented himself as the only man capable of restoring order. Who else says this? And then King Victor Emmanuel invited Mussolini to form a government. Mussolini then gradually dismantled the institutions of democratic government, and in 1925 made himself dictator, taking the title El Duce. He set about attempting to establish Italy as a great European power. As you can imagine, I was pretty freaked out by all this new information, so I reached out to my closest political friend, Monica Elle, and she will remain anonymous.
Thank you so much for meeting up with me in such short notice, Monica.
What's up?
I've been going through a little bit of a crisis, and I have a question for you.
Tell me.
Do you think that it's possible for wannabe Mussolini to be like a dictator, like a king?
You talking about number 45?
Yes.
Yep, that's a difficult question, Monica. I know. I've watched in horror as wannabe Mussolini, that's what I call Trump, undermine democracy and debase himself by bowing down to an autocratic strongman, Putin. I mean, what Trump did in Helsinki is the equivalent of your parents telling everyone at school that you still pee in the bed. Okay, what he did was a lot worse, but not any less treasonous. He's even considered handing over a former U.S. ambassador to Russia for Putin. And he even invited Putin to the U.S. in the fall despite objections from, everyone. Yet he hasn't been censured by Congress because his party runs it.
Here's the thing. People always say, oh, the president isn't smart enough to do X. The president isn't smart enough to do Y. But, we don't actually know how smart Mussolini was. But I don't think you have to be that smart. So I hope not. I take a lot of heart. Obviously, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I take a lot of heart in the checks and balances that have been working through this whole process, even as shoddily as they have been working. So I hope not. But I think that democracy is an active organism that has to keep being nurtured in order to stay alive. So I think anything's possible.
So my question is what's really stopping him from crowning himself king? What if he says, I'm gonna be king, and the Republicans are okay, and then the Supreme Court is sure, and then the Democrats are we just have to care about civility. What would happen?
I think we'd have to take to the streets, and so really part of it would be will the American people fight for themselves? As I know personally, there are not a lot of heroes in Washington. There are a lot of people who want to be visibly good, but who don't necessarily want to do the hard work. So I think the most important things right now are to call your representatives, to vote in the fall. Like, the civility thing, I think, is stupid. So they leveraged racism against people who weren't necessarily going to benefit from their cause. And I think that, like...
So what you're saying is that racism might give us a king.
I am afraid. I'm afraid.
Unfortunately for me, my dear friend Monica could not provide me the comfort that I needed this time. And so I bid adieu with tears in my eyes, with sadness for America. Shit, this could really happen. The Republicans like Trump in part because he runs the government like a business. In Trump's case, that means taking the achievements and work of others and putting his name on it, hiring only white people, and regret hiring the only black person and calling her a dog. And then giving all his family members really important positions and spending most of his time harassing his daughter in front of Melania. Surely this terrible man cannot be our president, let alone become a dictator. I had to consult a lawyer. Thank you for meeting up with me at this park on this very hot day.
You're welcome.
Are you okay?
Thank you for having me. I'm great.
You're great.
You.
Okay. So my first question to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that wannabe Mussolini could be a dictator?
And by wannabe Mussolini, you're talking about Donald Trump?
Yes, him.
In my opinion, no. I don't think he could.
Is there a situation that could happen that he could be like, I want to be king, and then the Supreme Court is like, fine, and then Congress is like, okay, and the Democrats are like, we have to worry about civility. Like, could that ever happen?
Anything is possible, but I don't think that could happen because, I mean, there is checks and balances, which everyone's heard of, and so in order for him to become a dictator, you'd have to amend the Constitution, and so and to get a constitutional amendment would be very difficult.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, screaming baby. The Supreme Court also backs Trump like they're his wingman instead of a bouncer. They supported his unexplainable Muslim ban, and that's just old news. Now Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, has been convicted on several counts, and Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer, has pled guilty, and still nothing. Trump is still wanker in chief. And I feel like he's doing a bunch of like really creepy stuff that, you know, people should be like, maybe stop. But Congress is like cool with it. The Supreme Court is like cool with it. And it's like, where does it stop?
The Supreme Court did make a decision on that, but then you have Congress can take action as well. Mm-hmm. And Congress can create laws if they want to, if they choose to, if they vote to go against that and refute it in some kind of a way.
But what if they don't, is what I'm saying? Because it seems like they just love him so much.
Well, if they don't, I mean, people serve in Congress for a limited period of time. And so if the people in the districts don't like what their congressman is doing or their senator is doing, then they can vote that person in or out.
But what if they love him? What if they love him?
Well, if there's a situation wherein the entire district and the entire country loves these decisions, then that's what's going to happen.
So it is possible. So I should be freaking out.
Well, I never said it wasn't possible.
And then it hit me. No one is there to stop this crazy man. Like checks and balances, the keystone to our democracy, we don't have that anymore. They're all Trump's minions. He's like the Regina George of America without a Katie to bring him down. The executive, judicial, and legislative branch are supposed to check each other so as to prevent tyranny. But they're all being run by sycophants and the spineless people who are definitely willing to choose party over country. The only person who's against DT in the White House, Congress, and Supreme Court is Melania. And that's just because she's the only one who doesn't like to get fucked by the Donald. And his supporters are willing to pick white supremacy of a country too. Trump will never get caught because with Trump's weirdly tiny hands, the glove just won't fit and they must acquit.